Welcome to Soul of Travel, Women's Wisdom and Mindful Travel. I'm your host, Christine Weinbrenner-Eyrich. Each week, you'll hear me having soulful conversations with women who are tourism professionals, trailblazers, and community leaders around the world. They share their personal and professional journeys to inspire you, and their stories teach you how to become a more conscious traveler, live life aligned with your values, and create a positive impact. We are thought leaders, action takers, and heart-centered change makers, and this is the soul of travel. Tania Carriere is the founder and CEO of Advivum Inc., a leadership transformation company, and its subsidiary, Advivum Journeys, a global retreats company and industry leader in transformational travel design. She is an ICF Professional Certified Coach, holds an MPA from Western University, and has been featured in Elle, Conde Nast Traveller, Psychologies Magazine, The Telegraph, and The Guardian. She is an Adjunct Faculty at the Modern Elder Academy and a regular contributor to several international blogs on personal leadership, midlife, and travel. Tania's recognized expertise is in leadership development, specializing in cultural transformation, employee engagement, personal renewal, and experiential learning. Her successful international career with forward-thinking organizations is as a result of her ability to engage individuals in highly creative learning scenarios that enable them to step into their potential, generating unified movement in teams and bringing together diverse groups for meaningful dialogue. As an epiphany designer and transformational travel retreat leader, she creates deeply engaging learning journeys which focus on personal vision, fulfillment, and life design, giving her participants a renewed sense of inspiration, balance, and direction. Tania's focus on stretching boundaries and inspiring discovery results from her passion for cultural travel, her love of learning, and her continuous exploration of her artistic self. In our conversation, Tania and I talk about the importance of investing in ourselves, how travel helps us learn more about ourselves, our beliefs, and behaviors, and can teach us how we may want to make changes in our daily lives. She also shares about her recent TEDx talk. We talk about navigating the messy middle and lessons we can use to navigate change, how travel is a great teacher in navigating change and getting comfortable with discomfort. Tania is a return guest, so if you want to hear more about her company or her background, I encourage you to go back to our previous conversation. I ask all my guests to share 3 words to describe themselves. Tania chose storyteller, world traveler, and epiphany designer. Join me now for my soulful conversation with Tania Carriere. Welcome to Soul of Travel podcast. I am your host, Christine, and today I'm very happy to be bringing back a guest who joined us way back in March of 2021, which now feels like maybe 10 years ago instead of 4 years ago. But welcome to the podcast for a return conversation. I have Tania Carriere, and she is the founder of Advivum Journeys. And I think we have a great conversation in store, so thank you for joining me.
Hey, Christine. It has been a long time. You know, time is not just the days on the calendar, but the length of experience lived. And we have lived through a lot since 2021. So I'm so happy to be back here.
Yeah, and it's really fun too because when we talked, that was still very much the beginning of this journey for the podcast. So it feels like it's come a long way. And yeah, you were one of those first people that I kind of met out in the world that I was like, oh, I can't wait to bring your perspective on travel to the podcast. And then since then, we've kind of woven back and forth and seen each other. And then I know recently we both kind of were like, wait, I think it's time to do this again. And so yeah, I'm really grateful for the universe to just plant that idea in our mind at the same time. And here we are. For those of you joining us for this conversation, we're not going to go into Tanya's backstory and kind of talking about her business from the standpoint that you don't know anything about it. You can definitely go back to episode 96 to hear more because we have so much to get into. I don't want to repeat anything, but I do really quickly want you to just share a little bit about Advivum Journeys, and then we'll dive in deeper.
Yeah. So Advivum Journeys comes out of a passion that I have to discover a new place and to discover a new sense of self in a new place. And that's why I realized I got hooked on travel so young and why I'm such an avid traveler. That sense of curiosity and possibility, the chance to change a narrative. So, in other words, yeah, I understand my life and my context and what's around me. But as soon as I go somewhere else, all of that is kind of a blank slate and new. And that's something that I just love that feeling of. So, Advivum Journeys is about bringing people on those kinds of experiences who want to not only just see somewhere new, but actually be someone new.
Mm.
And you get to play when you travel. You get to do that. You get to reinvent your story. And you get to decide when you go home, how much of that am I going to keep? You know, how much of that is going to become the new me? And how much of that was just fun for there? And I had a chance to explore that character. And now I'm going to go back to a different version. So Advivum Journeys runs retreats, and we like to play.
Yeah. And I love that so much because I think that's what initially resonated is that way of speaking about travel, because that's something I always felt. And when we first met, that's something I was like finding the language for. And as I heard you speak, I was like, oh, yeah, that is what I really wish people could see about travel or what I notice about myself in travel, especially what you were saying, is trying on a new identity or trying on parts of yourself or remembering parts of yourself that get lost in the day-to-day shuffle. Like that is something I feel like is a really constant theme, especially for women. I feel like when we take these solo travel or these group travel experiences, like we can just like glide back into ourself with this singular self identity and not business owner and mother and daughter and all the different things. It's just like this time to remember who we are. And then, like, well, also, like you said, if you're out in the world and you are someone who realizes like you're loving this aspect of food or hiking or dance or all these things, and then you're like, "Oh, I love dancing Christine. She gets to come back to my daily life." And, sommelier Christine maybe isn't so important to me, but I tried her on and it was fun, but now I realize that's not maybe who I wanna be right now, but I think this is such a this place of play and, like, auditioning selves is a really fun part of travel.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember the first time I went to France. That's what really grabbed me, because I was in all the things that were happening to me, and I was feeling a lot of pressure around trying to find work and pressure around my personal life and making decisions there and na 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 na. And I showed up and I was like, I don't think I'm all that fun. I'm a lot of great things. I know I'm a lot of great things, but I don't think I'm all that fun right now. Like I think I'm under the weight of being serious and professional and making decisions, and they're going to have lifelong impacts. And I looked around me and I was like, no one here knows that. No one here knows that this is the summer that I'm going to decide all these things. And I'm envious of that woman who's just sitting over there at a cafe by herself, bold as brass, legs crossed, enjoying, the French people and the sound and the fountain. And I want to be her. I want to be her. She's just laughing. And I thought, well, why don't you just go be her? Like, who here is going to stop you? And who here is going to say, oh, Tanya, you're in the middle of these important decisions. Do you really have time to stop and have a little red wine? Like, no one. It's the freedom of no backstory.
Mhm.
And then I realized, well, all that weight and that pressure was actually just me in my head on my shoulders. There really isn't, a whole committee standing around me every day going, oh, you have to be more serious. It was a real opening for me. And after that, I was like, hey, I think I need to cut French Tanya a little slack. Like she gets to come and play a little more often now. And so, yeah, that idea, we can create that spaciousness. And it's a practice. Once you learn how to do it, I don't have to go to France every time I need to bring her to life. I just have to remember, I remember that experience of what it was. So now how am I going to do it today? What am I going to do to bring her back into the situation, back into whatever's going on? And I work with a lot of people. They ask for simple things like, I used to be happy. I used to have time to laugh. I don't laugh anymore. And, if you're raising kids or you're working hard or, whatever the thing is, like sometimes it's the little things like laughter that kind of drop off the edge, and it's hard in your everyday to just go, okay, I'm going to schedule 10 minutes for laughter now. I'm going to be, I'm going to be more humorous or I'm going to be more lighthearted. And I think, gosh, no, if you can take yourself away for 2 days or a week or 2 weeks or, whatever's available to you, you can experience a different tempo and a different pace. And then you can hear the sound of yourself laughing. And then you're like, I remember. I remember what this feels like.
Mhm.
And that makes it transformative. That's why you can bring it back because it's actually a recall of something that's already in you. It's rarely a new learning,
Mhm.
It's more like, oh, yeah, I have that awareness again.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that because I do think too that it's, people talk about transformational travel and like, kind of becoming something new or someone new, but really I feel like it's really this excavation. And like you said, it's like this was in you, it just was buried. And I also think that, that moment when you realize that all the things that you're doing, like you were saying, is the backstory is just like a page that you can just tear because it doesn't really exist, and this is maybe far out there, but, like, once you see that really the only one holding you to that is yourself, I think that's really powerful, and yes, there's all these expectations, but they also don't have to define us, and I think it takes a while to get to that point in our lives, and we're definitely gonna talk about that in a little bit with our kind of exploration of midlife and what kind of that allows us as well. But I just think that is a really powerful thing and it might take baby steps to like fully get there. But like you were saying, the more you feel it, the easier it is to step back into it. And then pretty soon it's not such a far reach to get to that that release, that space of freedom.
Yeah, and you mentioned solo travel, which I'm a big believer in, and that's a place where people have a lot of those expectations and scripts around why they can't do it. It's so fascinating. It's like, I can't. Why? Often we can't answer.
Mm.
Is it scary because I am not allowed? I'm not supposed to want to go by myself. I should bring my partner. My goodness, of course I'm obligated to bring my kids. Or, like all of these things come up. And it's one of those perfect examples of, yeah, write all of those reasons down on a page and then is it really, really true? Or is that just the narrative that we were taught? That we were taught as women, that we were taught as responsible social beings, that we should always maintain the priority of others and the responsibility of others before our own regeneration.
Mhm.
And I just and I know you've seen the same thing with everybody that you've interviewed and that you've met on your travels. Once you realize, actually, when I give myself permission to lean into my own exploration, it is the thing that fuels everybody else's sustenance and change. Because the reality is, we are all living amidst change and through change, and we are changing,
Mhm.
right? And so, where else are you going to go build your own sense of resilience and possibility? And that's what's needed in order to support everyone else. So, big advocate for solo travel, and I know we share that.
Yeah. Well, and it's so interesting too, because I think what people are most resistant to is change or the discomfort of change. And so then those two things get caught up, but it's not avoidable. So it's a lesson that's important, right? Like the better you get at change, the better you get at everything because it's so important. And as you were talking about, the shoulds and the things, the barriers that are standing in our way, there's two different directions. So I want to start here. I'm reading You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay, which is an oldie but a goodie. And
Awesome.
one of the very first exercises is taking a piece of paper and writing "you should" on the top, and then just like writing all your shoulds and like really being honest. And I loved, some of the ones you mentioned just might not be ones that we like. It's easy to say, I should prepare these meals for my children, or I should go to bed earlier. I should, like, those ones feel obvious, but there's some other shoulds that are a little more baked in. And if you can get there, that's helpful. And then just going back, why? And then, like, don't let yourself off the hook. Like, ask why like two more times so that you can really start to understand where that should is coming from. So, people listening, I think, even if you've done this exercise before, I think it's one that you can always go back to because you keep getting deeper. Because at first, your body is going to resist this, like they resist change.
Yeah,
And then, like, you keep getting new awarenesses about yourself and how you think you need to show up, and then you'll evolve little, and then there'll be another pile of shoulds that you need to examine.
absolutely. And it's a part of our awareness training, but also our resilience training. You said change brings about discomfort. Discomfort is not bad. Discomfort is the moment that precedes momentum, that precedes action, that precedes a knowing and awareness as something new. We need discomfort for a lot of things to emerge. And, but most of us run from it. We run immediately and try and make it better. And it's we know that's where often the magic moments happen when you travel, right? I mean, it's sort of that discomfort of, I'm kind of lost. I don't know where I am. I'm not on the right track. I'm late for my check-in time with my Airbnb host. They're going to be all upset. I now look like an idiot standing here with my suitcase, having done the same, circle 3 times, and everybody's watching. And that's very uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable. And it's interesting to live through that and go, okay, and the sun is shining and I'm good. And then somebody walks up to you and says, hey, can I help? And you instantly make a connection, even if it's for only 2 minutes. And that reminds you that people are human and loving around the world. And it's not scary, and they're there to help you because they want you to have a good time in their city. And suddenly, discomfort has allowed me to discover connection, which I couldn't have discovered without it. It was the precursor for it.
Mhm.
So I'm really attentive. And as I say that, I'll confess, I hate discomfort like everybody else. Like, it's not like you get better at liking it. I think I just get better at naming it and going, it's okay. It's okay. This plate of food that arrived is not what I expected. I'm not familiar with these ingredients. It's just a moment of discomfort and okay. And try it, enjoy it, or don't, and that's fine too. I learned something there. And there's always, breakfast tomorrow morning, where we can redress whatever's happened here. So
Yeah.
I am on a mission to have people just feel a little bit better about that kind of feeling of messiness. It's like, yeah, who said mess was entirely bad?
Yeah, and I definitely think it's that label. Like, we try to avoid mess and discomfort and chaos and everything like the plague because of control, which we could probably talk about later too. Um, and yet, yeah, it's unavoidable, and it's just being able to realize it's a part of the journey. And I think even some of us will be like see it coming, and we're like, oh, here we go. And then even sometimes get a little excited because you're like, I know this is gonna get really bad for a moment or a period. And then you're like, but I know something's gonna be on the other side of this. And so like it's still uncomfortable, or it still brings up all these things, but you kind of can see the purpose of the wave as it arrives instead of just like trying to get out of the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is rescripting and retraining, and you're right. It is often the illusion of control and expectation. I wanted my flight to leave on time. I had that expectation. Well, that's lovely. I encourage that expectation. I hope my flights leave on time too. And when I see the announcement come up, I have to learn very quickly. I can either sit in the irritation and the discomfort of this is not happening as I expected it to, or go, wow, deep breath. Good thing I am super prepared.
Hmm.
Good thing I've got this great book and I've got a seat, and there's probably somebody here with a really interesting life story that I can start to get to know. And it's about changing the expectation,
Hmm.
not changing the context, because we do not have control over so many things, even though we wish we did.
Yeah. Well, and then the other part of this before we kind of went down this path, you had been talking a little bit about um choices and resistance, and when you were in the context of solo travel, like all the reasons why we can't do this. And I did want to talk a little bit about investing in ourselves, because I know this is a something as business owners and something as, teachers and people who want to guide people on this internal journey. Like, the very first thing we have to do is get someone to say yes. And, that's maybe the biggest obstacle of anything. Can we talk a little bit about, maybe you had said something to me that, you know, this is just a choice to be made. Like, there are all of these obstacles, and they are real, or like our narrative, and yet there's
Mhm.
still a choice to be made. So can you, yeah, just let's talk a little bit about what that looks like, maybe for people as they try to examine why they maybe don't say yes to themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we all have so many reasons. And I fundamentally think that the fundamental question for people is, what is pulling me? What is compelling me? What is that little voice desire? Because all of these reasons that we shouldn't are out here and stacking up. Uh, can we get clear on what this sensation is? And if you watch, kids, they're still very in tune with following that sensation, that impulse, right? I really want an ice cream. Why? That they do because it's a moment of fun. It's a moment of pleasure. It's a moment of sensation of taste. It's a moment of whatever it is for them. And they're willing to articulate that. And I think we teach ourselves, or we are taught to let go of following those impulses. So I'm always really curious, like, what was the impulse before the thought process happened? Before everything's stacked up. Can you just value that? regardless of what you do with it, can you just value that you have that impulse? I just have this impulse to be on my own for a little bit. Great. Just notice that. I just have this impulse to shake things up. Just notice that, name those things and don't lock them down. I think that's the very first thing, to be able to choose yourself. You know, in the end, everything is a choice. And when we say that our lives are too busy and we try and squeeze wellness, and I'm guilty of this too, we squeeze it into like what? Sometimes I've been known to do like 10-minute wellness chunks. I'm like, yeah, that is good for emergency rations. That's fine. Sometimes you have to pull that on, but that's not wellness. Like that's like breathing and gasps, and it will keep you alive, but that's not vitality and thriving. So if we're really leaning into my well-being, then I have to be in a way that is well. And that's going to take, more time, deeper dive, greater exploration, the support and celebration of others.
Mhm.
And for me, that's what happens when we travel. That's what happens when you connect with new friends and other people on the same journey, and you realize, oh, actually, there's a lot of wisdom that gets shared when we stand in a collective together. And it's not the same wisdom that gets shared in your unit, because that's a rehearsed script. That's something different, and it's important, but different.
Mhm. Oh, I'm like, oh, two good things there. And like all these books that I've been reading, I just feel like I want to be like, and to cite why this feels real and this, I'm like, I just read this book. We won't go there. But I was just thinking, of two parts is when you were saying, okay, what was the thing you heard that made you look for this experience? Like, I think that is such a cool question to ask, because I have asked people that and they think they don't know. And then when you see them, like, again, we know it. So it's just like realizing or reconnecting with it or even acknowledging, then it's really powerful. And just asking that question, like, changes the whole trajectory of whatever comes after it. Um, and I wish we all asked ourselves that before we like hit buy on something, right? Because it changes the energy of the thing. And I was also thinking of like, I just want a moment by myself. Okay, when you hear that as your whisper, and that's why I go to, Advivum and I look for what you have to offer, then I start feeling like guilt and shame and not, and this is me. I'm not saying everybody, but this is the experience I have, right? And then I think, okay, and then who else can do my job as parent but me? And who else can do? And so then all these things, these are the things that start to get in our way of that, right? And I have literally gone through this week. So this is a fresh conversation. So also I'm still not a pro. I did have
Yeah.
more awareness, so that was the cool thing. And I'm like, okay, as I'm about to hit the button to like submit the deposit, this money, 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 money thing comes up. And I'm like, okay, do we have this? Yes. Can I invest this in myself? Yes. And like, I just had to like clear the air first because I didn't want to bring that into the whole experience. But I'm telling you, like, my growth journey with travel isn't going to start when I get there in 4 months. It's started already. And I feel like that's part of the process I really love, especially with the containers that we work to create, is recognizing that that is a part of the experience. And, you're not getting that when you go on Travelocity and book something. Like, I think it's important to understand those inner workings now and already be healing that so that when you get there, you don't land with like guilt and shame. Like, you've already dealt with those. So you can be ready for what's happening now.
Yeah. And that guilt and shame, those are stories.
Hmm.
Those are narratives. Those are teachings. right? You didn't come into the world with that baked in you.
Mm-hmm.
Someone taught you. Someone taught you that you have certain obligations. I'm making it up because we haven't had this conversation, but you have certain obligations, and your obligations should be primary, and yourself should be secondary. And your obligations, when met, should look like something. Your parenting should look like you being present on the scene 24/7. I'm making it up, but that's a story. It's a narrative. Is it an absolute truth? No, there are many, many beautiful ways that people parent. And that's part of what we discover when we travel, right? When you are in different cultures and you bear witness to how they love their families and their children differently, but equally as well. You kind of open up this idea, oh, there isn't just one way, right? So the rule is something I can break if I still aspire to the outcome. So then I have to ask myself, so if I'm traveling, how am I still meeting my outcome? How am I still inspiring and sculpting my children to be beautiful, contributing human beings in this world?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I can answer that
Mm-hmm.
because you investing in yourself, saying, hey, be prepared to be a person that's constantly learning and growing and wanting more and giving more. Be a person that's constantly willing to challenge the narrative that they're being given in their home country by discovering something else. Be a person that's willing to make connections, visit others, and come home and teach and share with the generosity of new learnings.
Mm-hmm.
See, I can build your business case for you. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah,
Yeah, I better
yes, I
go.
want to be that parent,
Yeah. I mean, I love it so much. And like I said, obviously, like I can kind of get myself through those, but I still have those moments. So I just love for people listening just to think about that, and whether that yes to yourself is, investing in a marketing person for your business, or whether that's like taking a weekend off, or what, like there's these conversations that happen so quick we don't notice them. And so just being able to grab a hold of it, and like we said in the beginning, naming it and starting to take shape, like all of that is really important part of the growth of travel. And I love like how thinking about how people witnessing our travel experiences also impacts them, because I definitely think that's maybe a missed awareness. And it is like, if I think about how many people on this podcast, when I asked them who inspired them to travel the world, it was, my aunt who sent me postcards, or it was my grandma who told me these stories, or it was my father when he talked about his time in the military. So all of that was us just witnessing someone else's travel and growth, and it completely changed the trajectory of our own lives. So I think that that's a super powerful thing, and I love that you just made that even more important for me so that I can, I can use that in my own internal conversation. Hey listeners, it's Christine, hopping in with information about a unique opportunity from one of our past guests that I'm so proud to share with you. Recently, I chatted with Jaleesa Whitley, founder of Booked Trips, where she offers immersive experiences that take travelers from the page of beloved books to connect with the people and places that bring them to life. She recently announced the Booked Trips Maya Angelou Travel Scholarship Fund. This fund honors the legacy of Maya Angelou by providing travel funds for two women of color who reflect Angelou's commitment to social justice, creativity, and cultural exchange. Two travelers will receive scholarships up to $5,000 towards the cost of a 2025 Ghana, Morocco, or Colombia booked trips experience. Both her journeys and this opportunity align with the values of the podcast, and I'm so happy to support Jaleesa and help her get the word out. Applications open February 3rd and close on March 3rd. If you are interested, please visit bookedtrips.com. That's bookedtrips.com for more information, including a list of the eligibility criteria. And if you're curious about Jaleesa's trips, I encourage you to listen to our conversation in episode 203. Now let's head back to our soulful conversation. So I wanted to get to talking with you about the messy middle. And I was looking on your website as I was preparing for this conversation, and you have a retreat coming up that's the reimagined self. And one of the questions, like in the little description, is who do I dare to be now? And I think those two things, like an awareness of what you call the messy middle and the question of who do I dare to be now? Like that's a whole nother journey. And I would guess because of where I'm at in my own life, it's a journey that many of my peers and colleagues and friends are in. So I want to talk with you about this and what this means in your life and what this means in the context of travel.
Yeah, I mean, the messy middle is that place between, if we talk about it personally, who I know myself to be, I am this person, and then who I am about to become. And there's this, it's almost like, when you see a trapeze artist and they're on this bar and then they're going to reach for that bar, and then there's this moment where they're on no bar, and you're like, "Ooh, I hope you grab the next one." And we all sort of feel that moment, and we feel it in life too. And it comes many, many times. It's not just one middle. It's not just one transition. You went from, I don't know, single person to being a partner with someone. It's like, who am I as a partner? I don't really know yet. I know who I am as a single person. And now I'm feeling even more attached to her because he feels secure. I got a hold of this bar. That one is yet. Or if you're becoming a mom, or a parent or a step parent, it's like, wow, or a job transition, or you retire, or. I mean, there's just so many of them. And it's that we're talking about discomfort. It's that time where it's like nothing is really for sure. I don't really know for sure anymore. But I think when we don't know for sure, the flip side of that is, hey, there's nothing locked in. So I get to choose. I get to discover. I get to discover now, you know? I have this one client who said, I knew what my kids needed from me when they were in high school. Like I figured it out. I figured out how to be that parent. But now they're in university and they're doing really well. And I don't know who I am anymore to them, And I'm like, that's awesome. Who would you dream of being? Like, that's awesome if you can embrace the discovery portion of it. Or the other classic one is, I've finished this career. I'm done with this focus. I want to do something new with my life, not necessarily retire as in not do anything, although it might be that, but I want a new pivot. I just don't know what it is yet. I'm like, well, it's pretty hard to discover that when you're hanging on to that other bar because the new one is out there and you won't know it until you actually just, okay, I'm letting go and hopefully I grab a new thing. So that transition, I think, is quite magical. It's quite magical, but yeah, it's terrifying. You're, however many feet up there going, oh my goodness,
Mhm.
I hope this works.
Mhm. Yeah, my visceral reaction just as you're describing it, both in terms of trapeze, because I am terrified of heights, and that, like, clinging to the thing, even if you don't even want it anymore, like, because there's that space between, um, yeah, it's such, uh, an uncomfortable moment, and I love kind of trying to embrace that as not necessarily fear, but possibility. Like you said, it's not because of the uncertainty, or it's that everything is possible. That's maybe more scary than like knowing, okay, I'm going from step one to step two. Like, and step two is harder or different, but there's already the step there. It's like when you're like in step 1A7, and you're like, I don't know A7.
Yeah.
And our brains have a very hard time. I mean, I think that's part of wired to survival, right? Is to know what's coming is literally how we survive, and create strategies to navigate. And yet, like, the kind of like you were saying, when you're lost and you magically find the person you were meant to meet, you only get there by letting go. And it really is where the coolest things happen every time. And yet, like, we have to fight ourselves so hard to like hang out there.
Absolutely. And it really, it sounds like we're making up the story that that place is the place of magic, but it's what most people come home and share after they travel. It's like, oh, I met this awesome person on the bus, or, I lost my camera and I was upset about it. And so someone actually returned it to me, and I couldn't believe how kind people are. Or, it's those moments that actually catch us unaware, and they catch our breath, and we go, "Wow, wow, the world really can be that." And that moment that I was telling you about, where this lady came over and said, "Are you lost? And can I help you?" She ended up being quite a chatterbox, and she was an elderly woman and started telling me about the whole history of the square that I was in. And, I was on this, direct path to try and check into my Airbnb. And in the end, I arrived, I think, 2 hours late. We texted the person and she was like, "No, no." And she actually started sharing her food with me and telling me where I was. And I thought, this is like someone just sent me my own private guide to understand where I am in this moment. And somehow sharing a moment with her, I felt it to be a more important objective than anything else. That somehow she was getting something and I was getting something. And I mean, I wish I could tell her, that's happened ages ago, like decades later. Hey, I'm still talking about you. And I
Mhm.
remember the story about your granddaughter's wedding and about this courtyard. And I could take people back to that courtyard with the same excitement. And that's the kind of magic that awaits when we just, okay, let it go
Mhm.
and see what will happen.
Yeah, and I mean, I love that in travel and agree that it's never the thing that was on your itinerary that most lands and is the story you tell. And in fact, when I work with people to help them discover their travel values, that's like some of the first questions is, okay, tell me like 3 of your favorite moments in travel. And so it isn't usually like, oh, the moment I first saw the Eiffel Tower. Maybe it is, and then you would maybe ask why, right? But it's usually like, for me, I had a moment, when I ended up with a guide that was sharing his mosque with us, and the story that he told and the way he wanted to share all of these details that were super intimate. And like, if I tell the whole story in detail, which I will not now, I cry every time. And this happened
Mhm.
24 years ago. And again, like, I wish I could tell him, like, I didn't know in that moment, but that moment changed who I am. And it's all these people. There was this grandmother that ran a bakery when I had my daughters in Greece, and she introduced my daughters to her granddaughter, and they played for 7 days together and didn't speak the same language, and like all these things. And that is their moment. Like, they're like, remember how great it was to play with her, and that her grandma brought us fresh baked goods every day. And like, they felt like they moved into these people's
Mm.
home, and they like gave the little girls some shoes that we'd outgrown because we were traveling for a long period of time. And I'm like, well, we're just carrying shoes you can't wear with us. And they're like, they just think that's a normal way to travel, which, you and I both know that doesn't happen all the time for many people. But it was that thing we didn't look for. And also it's usually connection, which I also think
Yeah.
is so interesting is because we live in such a disconnected society that real connection, and I think also like you said, or we've said in past conversation, is like this idea of humanity coming to life, or this very
Mhm.
raw connection is just essential to like healing and understanding. And I think because it's such a contrast to how we live often, unless we're lucky to be like you and me and we like seek out this constantly, but like it's pivotal, and it can't happen in the space. It always happens in the space between the two things you thought you were there to do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so funny. My Eiffel Tower story, one of my favorite moments is around the Eiffel Tower, but it wasn't about seeing the Eiffel Tower. There was that lost little girl that I spotted, and she didn't speak English and she didn't speak French, which are my two languages. And there's something very precious about a little one that's lost and not scaring them and helping them find their mom and hoisting her up and trying to be, not scary to her and encourage her to call out for her mom and dad and not scare the mom and dad when they see that I've hoisted her up so that she can see everyone. And they didn't speak English or French, and there was a flurry of emotion and tears and gratitude. And somehow, yeah, like I feel it now. Somehow you just get connected to the fact that we're all human together. And we can be human together if we come out from these protected places that we live in, these safe routines, which are safe, but don't necessarily give us these little tentacles into one another.
Mhm. Yeah, I feel like living I'm like, where's the words for this? What I'm feeling is that there's different between like living and like being alive, right? Like, and like between having a vibrant life and just passing time. And I think those are the things too that like our soul gets a little excited about when we have those moments too. And that's why it's also so emotional, is just because we do unfortunately live in a little bit of a numbed out world, and it is a part of
Hmm.
modern existence, and yet like our heart and our soul remembers like passion and joy and love and connection. And I think travel gives us those things in spades. Even my daughter was just saying, here in Colorado, like she's like, all the houses are like brown and cream and white. And you look at pictures of like Italy, and she's like, look at all the color. Just to be there in that color makes me feel more alive. And I I think that understanding of what makes you feel vibrant is a really important thing. And the other thing I wanted to just tap into is, people wonder or ask like why you're in this industry and what are you doing, and I'm like, It's this, like this. I wish people were watching, they're just listening to this podcast, if they could see the look on your face and they could feel what I feel witnessing you. Like, that's what I am doing. I just want as many people to be looking back at me with that look on their face and to know that they just lived and felt that, because I've been privileged to live and feel that, and it's just the most important thing. And there's not the best language for it, and yet I know you and I put ourselves out there over and over again, just like pleading to give people this gift. Like, it's a real treasure, and it feels like a treasure to witness it and to give it. And um yeah, I just wanted to kind of, yeah, express my gratitude for the people that we
Mm,
know in the world who are doing that, because there's myth.
yes. And I think you and I have both experienced and held groups, and that's why we do what we do, to create that space of belonging. And we've seen after, after any retreat, it's what people most want to carry home with them is the sense of belonging that they have with the people that they've spent their time with and the people that they've met on the journey. And we know there's a lot of science behind belonging now. It's not just a nice to have or a whimsical thing. We've extended our lifespan by 30 years over the past century. Like 30 years. You and I have 30 more years to live than our foremothers did 100 years ago. That's a lot of time. And what is most directly linked to making those 30 years vibrant? It's belonging. That's the thing that gets pegged. If you have that sense of connection, and so connecting to your pod, your home pod, awesome. But it's more than that. It's connecting to the world. It's connecting to others. And it's the experience of creation of connection that we know actually contributes to that renewed sense of belonging. And I can't think of a better way than, traveling with groups, traveling on a retreat, traveling where there is intention for that to be created, which is different because I'm sure you've gone traveling, as am I, to places that don't really facilitate an easy sense of connection. And fine, that's something else, but that moment where you do have that knit sense of togetherness, there's nothing that fuels us more.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's one of the things that I love about small group travel is that intimacy and that connection, and also something that you kind of have to experience to understand the value of. But I remember a retreat I ran a few years ago, and we had met several times virtually beforehand, and I had my coaching calls, but also to build connection before we got there. And like the hotel everybody arrived in before the journey even began, I think if we never left there, it would have been enough
Yes. Yeah.
because these women, as they saw each other, like, across the hotel lobby and, like, ran to embrace a complete stranger already, like, feeling that belonging. It
Yeah.
was like, I mean, that's it, right? Again, this is that moment you're like, "Oh, it worked. The magic happened." Like, the end. And then all the other things, obviously were important too, but, um it just feels like a really special privilege. And I also was thinking, as you mentioned, the 30 years longer, also kind of if you look at the messy middle of our lives, then that's often, let's say 40s and 50s, right? And also for many women, this is a time of like empty nesting or career transitions or maybe even losing a partner. And so then like this messy middle also times with like the end of connection coming from your bubble, which I love how you said that, right? And so then you are looking externally for connection. And I like was really curious about why does it look like this group of women are so actively seeking connection outside of their home or themselves. And I'm like, oh, I see now. It's because like this built-in point of purpose and connection has dissolved in many ways, and we need that. And I think it's amazing how many people are focusing on creating that now.
Absolutely. And also, if we look at archetypes, especially around women, there's an archetype for a 30-year-old woman. She's a creator of some sort. So she's either creating her family, she's creating her career, she's in creation mode. It's a high action mode. That's when our brains are retraining all the pieces of data. We know that this is on the stove, this child is here, this has to be picked up, this document is due, like it's boom, 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 boom. It's an archetype, right? It's a very strong female archetype. And then we move in midlife to a different archetype. We move into the wise woman archetype. And the wise woman is the woman who attaches herself to intuition. She has the ability to actually see patterns, much bigger scopes. So she's now thinking about how are my actions influencing the planet and how is it influencing my community and what can I do to create this global healing and this bigger connection. We get concerned about communities. We are there looking at bigger questions for ourselves and for one another. And so wise women often work in pods and tribes, right, all together. Whereas creator women are very much focused on the delivery. So I think that is an archetypal shift that often happens for us in midlife, and where we say, actually, I want to knit together the narratives and think, we actually used to sit a long time and knit together. There was the knitting of stories and the knitting of traditions and the knitting of medicines and the knitting of knowledge, and we want to return to that. So I think that also gets discovered as we enter into this phase and we go through midlife. And that's a big part of reimagining ourselves. It's like there was nothing wrong with the previous self. It's not a rejection of who I was. It's not an acknowledgement of, oh, not her anymore. It's a chance to sort of breathe and reimagine and say, actually, I am emerging again into a new version. And given that we have these extra 30 years, there's probably a few
Mm.
reimaginings that are going to happen, right? I mean, who you and I will have the opportunity to be in our 60s and our 70s and our 80s is totally unscripted. It is unscripted. We cannot yet imagine what will be available to us at that time. And so we cannot imagine the person that we will want to be at that time. It's just not possible. But hopefully it's exciting.
Yeah. I do think it's also interesting, like, I feel like there's kind of like a plan that gets you to like 40 to 50, right? Like a societal plan that gets you
Mm.
there. Like you kind of know, like, I should graduate high school and I should go to college and we're going to use all the shoulds, right? And I should get married and I should have two kids and I should. And then all of a sudden, like those dissolve too. So then there you are, like reaching for the next thing and it's not defined. Like it is infinite. And yeah, it's so cool and so scary at the same time. And I think we live in a kind of a unique time because we're all these things are happening at the same moment. Like people are having a greater awareness and they're having this understanding and they're understanding the limitlessness of this possibility and that this doesn't mean like I go into a retirement home for 40 years. Like it means like we see maybe we're one of the first generations to see these great women who are 70 and 80 and like s- still being the most vital and contributing women in our world. And I think over and over, I just like look at those women and think, I cannot wait to be 60 or I cannot wait to be 70 and be that cool and that strong and that confident. And I was actually thinking about this as we were getting ready to talk today. And I was like, I remember when I was little and young and I looked at like the Golden Girls and this is what
Yes.
I thought it was like to be 50 or I think they were even like in their 40s, right? And now I look and I'm like, no, they must have been in their 70s or 80s. No. And so like I have like this own story that I have to constantly keep like wiping away of like this is still just the beginning. This is nowhere near what that looked like in my mind. Just keep embracing these other women who are showing the possibility of a way forward with all of this strength and grace and power.
Absolutely. I so totally agree. I think truly the best emerges as as we continue through. That's been my experience. So
Yeah.
hopefully I'm right. It continues that way.
Yeah. All right. Well, I love this conversation. Like we kind of hit on some of the things I planned and none of the things we planned, which I knew would be the perfect like recipe for our time together. Before we end, I just wanted to give you the opportunity to share a little bit about what you have coming up, and then we also have our rapid fire questions to end our conversation.
Oh, yay. First, I just want to say I just want to encourage everyone to feel comfortable leaning into asking questions. Get rid of the notion that we're supposed to have it all figured out, or that we're supposed to have ourselves all figured out, or that we are one person. No, no, really no. And you thought you had it all figured out. All of us did at 16. Oh, I know we all retorted to our parents or our caregivers, like, you're not the boss of me. I know who I am now. And can you imagine having, figured it out then? I mean, I don't want to be her. She was glorious and missed so many things, so asking questions and reimagining, I think, really is one of the greatest gifts that we can step into. And I would invite anybody who is just curious about, who else can I be? What more vibrancy can I bring to my life? Or what new direction could I explore? Can I be honest about how I keep myself back? Or what stories I tell that keep me safe instead of stepping over the line. Um, those are great things to come to a retreat with, because we do play that facilitates all of that, travel that facilitates that, discovery that allows for that newness to come about. And I do have 3 retreats this year, but there are retreats ongoing every year: England, France, Quebec City, Baja, Mexico, where I am right now. So, yeah, I would invite anybody just to come to the website, book a call to say hi, because as you and I have confessed very publicly here, we both love connections. So, so I welcome anybody just to drop into my calendar with no agenda, and say hi because they want to chat and talk about the messy metal, or come on a retreat with me.
Yeah. And I just wanted to share because this is one of the ways that initially after we met that I was able to keep sharing space with you is you have like your mini retreats and they're around things that I think are really cool to think about and ask questions about like how do I revive joy? How do I fantasize? Like all these things that maybe we don't spend time, like you were saying, 10 minutes of questioning is and 10 minutes towards this intentional focus on my well-being is probably not going to get us there. And I loved when I was able to join you for those conversations. So it's a good reminder to for my own self. But I think it's great. And also the thing you were saying, like bringing those questions. I think sometimes people are intimidated to go on retreats because they don't already have the answers to those questions, or they maybe don't know the questions, or they are afraid to admit the questions. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's so good. Can you imagine starting with that question and just like seeing what happens, bringing that with
Yeah,
you? Like, questions are the best. They're the best things, like connection and then questions. That's
yeah.
my jam.
I agree. Pack the questions in the suitcase. That's what's meant to come along with you. And I would say if you already have the answer, you have to know that it was the person back there that answered that question, right? So think about, like, if the question is what should I wear, it's the 16-year-old you that's answering, and it's like, well, we need to update that because that I don't want to live that out.
Mm.
That's not the outfit for me anymore. It's also not the life for me anymore. It's not the aspiration, the way I want to express myself. So I need to be prepared to say, I don't know, and that's cool. I will know. I'll merge into it.
Mhm.
I'll discover it. And yes, thanks for reminding me about those mini retreats. So those are virtual every month and they're free. They're just so that we can feel out one another and really just create what I think is the heartbeat that all of us want to be living in, one that is supportive and appreciative and abundant.
Yeah, and I think, like, we create that over and over because it's a space we wanna live in, and so we just, like, keep holding that space for more and more people, so I appreciate you doing that. Okay, rapid fire-ish. We'll heavy the ish here for us, I'm sure. What what are you reading right now?
Oh, what am I reading? How the brain changes itself. I'm really curious about neuroplasticity, and I'm totally fascinated, and I'm trying to couple that with some reading on quantum physics and how it relates to meditation, and I got to say, it's blowing my brain apart. So if anybody's got that down, they please come in my calendar and give me a tutorial. I love it, but I'm just sitting there going, "Wow, I got to reread this paragraph again."
Yeah. I was just telling my best friend, like, I kind of go through these peaks and valleys of where you're like, "Ooh, I just consume all this information, and my mind's blowing all over the place," and then, like, probably integration, I have to settle down and, like and I'm back. I'm headed towards one of those peaks again, and it's fun, but it's also so intense because 'cause you're just like, "Whoa, that thing," we're living in that, like, expansive, explosive moment,
Yeah.
which I think is also really important right now, and probably you and I could digress into a whole 'nother conversation about that, but, okay, the next, what is always in your suitcase or backpack when you travel?
Mm. Oh, I have a very definitive. So probably like you, carry on only, even if I'm going for 3 months. That's just the way I roll. What is always, always in there? Let's go for one of the more my jewelry. There are a few favorite things, not necessarily expensive, not, just like favorite things that just kind of, I don't know, kind of help me zhuzh up a day.
Yeah, and make you feel like you, wherever you are.
Yeah.
To sojourn, to me means to travel somewhere as if you live there. Where is somewhere that you would still love to sojourn?
Oh gosh, that list is so long. Um, the country of my heart is France. So every year that is an impulse that I cannot ignore and I do not ignore. And I'm very luckily spend a couple months there. But right now I'm also super curious about Turkey. It just keeps whispering to me. And I had a most tantalizing 14 hours in Istanbul in a layover, and it nearly killed me. Like, I nearly chose to miss my flight because I was like, even the airport is exciting. It's one of the best airports I have ever been to. And I was like, maybe I'll just scuttlebutt the rest of my trip and kind of stay here. So I think that one is really calling to me right now.
Yeah. What is something you eat that immediately connects you to a place you've been?
Cheese to France. Yeah, that's an immediate
Yeah.
go.
Who was a person that inspired or encouraged you to set out to travel the world?
You know, I think it was my dad. My dad was a very young dad, so he and my mom were in university when I was born, and we were in university outside of their hometown. And then dad got a job as a geodetic engineer, and so we would travel, do a lot of road trips with him. And I think I learned very, very early on that moving and discovering, like moving, setting up, staying somewhere, discovering where we were, packing up, and moving, and going somewhere else was a fascinating rhythm. And I don't remember any angst or fear. I always remember mom and dad giving me this sense of adventure as we were doing that. And I think that just got baked into me.
Mm, I love that. If you could take an adventure with one person, fictional or real, alive or past, who would it be?
Oh my God. I think I would have to rent out a 747 because I could fill that. I could fill that with people. Oh my gosh, if I could fill that with people. Who comes to mind right now? We were talking about um, women and wise women. And so this is a sort of answer, so I hope you permit it. But right now, I am super fascinated by women who are older than me, who often go unnoticed. And right now, even when I'm traveling, I'm noticing them and I've had this now beautiful photo album of just these wonderful women who are in their own skin, living their life, and clearly have stories to tell. And I have taken to approaching them and saying, would you mind staying 30 more minutes at your table? Can I buy you another coffee or glass of wine? Or can I join you on your stroll around this pond? And can you just if you were to give me one piece of advice, what would you tell me? What story of your life is worth sharing? And so it would be with just random people, wise women that I don't yet know. That's who I would fill the plane with, and I'd be like, all right, I'm open. What am I meant to learn now?
Yeah, I love that, and honoring that wisdom. I think that's really important, and changing the narrative around the value of that wisdom. I think so. That feels like something we're both aligned in adding to the things that
Mhm.
that fuel our fire. Okay, the last question. As you know, Soul of Travel is a space for celebrating women in the travel industry. Who is one woman that you admire and would like to recognize here?
Am I allowed to say you?
You can.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And not just in a de facto way, but I really have a great appreciation for the depth of integrity and the depth of heart that you bring to this passion of yours, which is both about travel and about connection, but also about weaving a new narrative for all of us, to learn about the world and ourselves. And so, yeah, I see you all. We share a little stratosphere together. We're in this space together, but we don't often get to be one on one or in conversation. But I see you orbiting, in this same space, and it gives me a great sense of comfort. So thank you. I really do appreciate the work that you do and the voice that you have.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And as I'm working on receiving, I also fully receive that. So thank you. And likewise, like I'm so grateful that you're also in my orbit. And I think we need people like that out there, just that reflect that back to us, because sometimes this is hard and lonely work, even though it's rewarding. There's a lot of time in between that is feels less rewarding. So it's always great to see that and have it mirrored, and I appreciate it. So thank you so much for coming back and sharing your wisdom here on the podcast. And hopefully, part three will be in our future. If anybody has any questions after listening, they can definitely reach out and share those. I know we would love to come back even for maybe a quick chat. I have a new thing in my Soul of Travel Beyond that's soulful stopovers, which are just like very short questions that are, kind of more to the point than this lengthy conversation. So who knows? Maybe someone out there has something for us. But until then, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much. I loved it. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Soul of Travel, presented by Journey. I hope you enjoyed the journey. If you loved this conversation, I encourage you to subscribe and rate the podcast. Please share episodes that inspire you with others, because this is how we extend the impact of this show. Learn more about each of my guests by reading our episode blogs, which are more than your average show notes. I think you'll love the connection. Find our episode blogs at www.souloftravelpodcast.com. I am so proud of the way these conversations are bringing together people from around the world. If this sounds like your community, welcome. I'm so happy you are here. I am all about community and would love to others over 50. I'd also like to share a quick thank you to my podcast producer and content magician, Carly Eduardo, CEO of Convergente. I look forward to getting to know you